Thank you for watching, everybody. Thanks for being here, and thanks for being part of the real story. Today, hey, some new attire for you. We'll get into that in a sec. Tonight's show, though, I was listening to a BBC broadcast. That's the British Broadcasting Corporation. Government-owned, needless to say. But I was listening to a BBC radio piece, and what I thought was interesting was it was verifying some information I had dug up before. And that was that in 1933, there was an attempted coup of the United States government. You remember what a coup is? Yeah, you always hear about it in South America, you hear about it over in Africa. But over here in the United States, they tried to take the most highly decorated United States Marine, a man by the name of Smedly Butler. What was interesting was Smedley, he outed the people. And what I thought was really interesting was one of them named, particularly, was Prescott Bush. Rather an interesting name, huh? Yeah. And this all came out in the McCormack Dickstein Committee. So, wow. I mean, that in itself tells you that, geez. Guys who, wow, why Bush and stuff? Because he was banking for the Nazis? Union Bank, that's right, just like Wall Street today, scumbag bankers, okay? But yeah, Brown Brothers Harriman was the name of the bank, Union Bank, whatever, and he was a director, and he had his assets frozen in 1942 because he was dealing and trading with the enemy that we were at war with. So I know all you neocons probably don't want to hear this, and you notice they kept it quiet during all the Bush years, but people went to the National Archives and they got this information. I thought it was interesting. But the other thing, too, what we have for you is, and that is, if you think about it, we have Russian immigrants here in the United States, here in Sharon, Massachusetts. And if you ask them, they said, if you heard the government put out information when you were in Russia, you knew it was propaganda. You knew that they lied to you. But over here in America, when the government gives us information like it was guys in caves, we think, oh, they're the best, this love for authority, they must be telling us the truth. When they said he's got weapons of mass destruction, we said, oh, they love us, they must be telling us the truth. When they said, oh, we're putting fluoride in your water for your teeth, we said, oh, it's not propaganda, they're telling us the truth. And we started, oh, this banker bailout is really going to save the economy. They weren't lying to us, they were telling us the truth. When they said, oh, this new Obamacare, that's not a tax scheme or whatever. No, it's about health care. Oh, and, you know, they were telling us the truth. Where I'm going is, when you talk to people from Europe or from other spots around the world where the media is controlled and the people know it, they realize mostly what they get in their media is controlled media, is propaganda. Yet here in the United States, here and even Sharon, Barney Frank represents you in Washington. He doesn't represent the big bankers. He didn't help pass the TARP. No, he's working for you because you live in Sharon. You love Barney, you know? Yeah, because it's for you, you know. Once again, here we believe, oh, we've got this great education system, and we have a media that what? That keeps an eye on things? The media is so controlled and manipulated, they told you that the guy had weapons of mass destruction. They didn't tell you that Donald Rumsfeld sold him the sarin gas, did they? No, they didn't say Donald Rumsfeld, when he was the chairman of the board of that nuclear company, sold the nuke parts, no, to North Korea. No, they didn't tell you that, did they? Because they care, you what? They care about, because we in America have stopped, oh, I don't know, our critical thinking. We stopped, you know, any type of thinking for ourselves. You know, the media now tells us what to watch, what to eat, how to go. We're told everybody's Al-Qaeda. Well, the one thing I want you to know is, I love this one. This is a good one. I want you to, you know, let's get a grip on this. Ready? You'll love the title. It's Mass Murderers Agree That Gun Control Works. So when you start hearing our people who are turning this into a police state, and a fascist police state at that, when they start saying, well, we've got to control the guns because there's blonde-haired, blue-eyed Al-Qaeda. Yeah. Now, they didn't tell you that, like, well, Timothy McVeigh was run out of Elohim City, was run by the FBI. No, they didn't tell you that, did they? Because they told you the truth. Yeah, and when you look at the Pentagon when it was struck by the plane, and there's no wings for a 757, no tail for a 757, no two engines out on the wings for a 757, that's because they don't tell you propaganda, do they? When you look at Shanksville, Pennsylvania, Flight 93, oh my gosh, where'd the plane go? They tell you the ground swallowed it. I mean, it's not only propaganda, but it's asinine propaganda. They didn't tell you that the Taliban was here in 2000, did they? that they were negotiating a natural gas pipeline, that the head negotiator for the oil companies in, where was this, Waco, Texas? They didn't tell you that his name was Hamid Karzai, but they'll tell you he's the president of Afghanistan today, won't they? Because we, for some reason, we believe you've been buying this spoon-fed propaganda. So anyway, once again, for you Russian viewers here in Sharon, talk to your neighbors, maybe come on the show, and you can sit beside me and say, yeah, when the government used to tell us stuff in Russia, we knew it was BS because it was all propaganda. So when they tell you stuff over here, I don't know what makes you think they tell you the truth anymore. When you catch them lying constantly, what does make you believe they're telling you the truth? What, because Jon Stewart said so? Jon Stewart doesn't tell you his brother's like the COO of what, the New York Stock Exchange? He didn't tell you that, did he? Didn't tell you he met with Geithner. Didn't tell you that all your Treasury secretaries came from where? Goldman Sachs. I have people tell me, my mother's friend or whatever, he works for Goldman Sachs. That's like saying, hey, my mother's friend is the world's biggest stinking, slimy, dirtbag crook that she knows. But to her, the propagandist told her, oh, the banks are there trying to save you. I love that one, you know? Like throughout history, it hasn't been tyranny fighting banks, you know, that the banks bring tyranny on the people. Us Nigeria, they started with $1 billion worth of debt and ended up with $50 billion. How do you get 0 and 50 when borrowing 1? Because you dealt with bankers. I won't tell you about compound interest. Anyway, let's get back to, I'm sorry, I was a little windy on this one. But yeah, check it out. This is the White House coup, 1933. Don't believe me. Other people did the research for you.
First, Mike Thompson begins a paper chase that takes him into the dark heart of fascism in the America of the 1930s as Document investigates the White House coup.
On the 21st of November 1934, the following rather chilling article appeared in the New York Times. It concerns the discovery of a planned coup that could have altered the course of American history. Yet today, hardly anyone knows anything about it.
A plot of Wall Street interests to overthrow President Roosevelt and establish a fascist dictatorship backed by a private army of 500,000 ex-soldiers and others appeared before the House of Representatives Committee on Un-American Activities, which began hearings on the charges.
If these long-forgotten accounts can be relied on, I seem to be looking at an attempt to set up a fascist government in the land of the free. A coup that could have toppled one of America's most revered presidents, paved the way for a possible alliance with Italy and Germany, and thereby change the complexion of World War II.
Fascism was seen as an example to be learned from, because it seemed like a quick fix. All you needed to do was get people to shape up.
You could have had a handful of the wealthiest people in the United States found guilty of treason and sentenced to death.
But just what was this plot? Who were the Wall Street interests? Or was this nothing more than a moment of paranoia from a national media not renowned for its self-restraint? Well, the answers to some of these questions may have to wait until I can get my hands on the bulk of the evidence, documents detailing evidence heard behind closed doors by a congressional committee. But I already have the official statement released by that committee when it reported back to Congress. Its members clearly had no doubt that a fascist coup was in the offing.
In the last few weeks of the committee's official life, it received evidence showing that certain persons had made an attempt to establish a fascist organization in this country. There is no question that these attempts were discussed, were planned, and might have been placed in execution when and if the financial backers deemed it expedient.
So such a plot, backed by powerful people, was waiting in the wings. That much is very clear. But how did it come to this? Well, it all happened during one of the bleakest moments in US history.
They used to tell me I was building a dream.
The America of 1933 was in the teeth of the Great Depression, a time of extreme poverty, desperation, and the barren plains of the grapes of wrath.
Brother, can you spare a dime?
I see millions of families trying to live on income so meager that the pall of family disaster hangs over them day by day.
Once I built a tower, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime?
The Great Depression is not called the Great Depression in this country by accident.
Michael Kazin is Professor of History at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C.
It was the deepest and the longest economic downturn in American history. As many as 1/3 of the labor force was unemployed in the early 1930s especially. Really the core of the industrial economy was all but shut down.
Say, buddy, can you spare a dime?
All of this added to a sense that American society was coming apart, not just the economy. People no longer had much faith in the authorities at any level, economic or political.
Yet the image of those days we've been left with is not social unrest, fascism and treasonous plots, but one of dignified suffering and resilient faith in the American dream. No one illustrated that better than President Franklin D. Roosevelt, whose New Deal reforms promised jobs, pride and fresh hope to ordinary Americans.
I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
FDR's New Deal policies brought an increase in public work programs, more help for the poor, and the removal of the dollar from the gold standard. Yet while history remembers FDR as a visionary saviour in America's hour of need, some at the time saw him in a very different light.
There were major elements in the business community that hated Roosevelt, and they hated Roosevelt out of all proportion to the scale of the measures that he had actually brought in.
Professor Tony Badger is Master of Clare College, Cambridge, and author of several books on Roosevelt's New Deal.
These were businessmen who essentially thought that Roosevelt was putting America on the wrong road in a big way in 1933, and that it was setting the federal government up as a sort of arbiter and enforcer and intervener in the American economy in a way that they were deeply afraid of.
Such powerful enemies had been made within 100 days of FDR taking office in 1933.
The businessmen were also aware that out in the country there were demagogues who were making really popular, apparently radical-sounding appeals, and they were always worried that Roosevelt was unleashing these forces, would encourage these, what they thought of as crackpots, to wreak havoc.
The right wing in America wasn't going to sit back and let this happen. Although its members were a curious alliance of rich and poor, North and South, they were united by one central concern. America was changing in a way they didn't like. Professor Kazin.
The idea that the government would create jobs, the idea that these jobs would be given to all religious groups and all racial groups was very threatening. And so a lot of people who didn't like what Roosevelt seemed to be doing with the government didn't like it, partly because the very people who were cheering Roosevelt were people who this still majority of white Protestant Americans believed should not have any power at all in government, should be subservient.
American society was fracturing along racial lines as well as political ones, and the right was sensing a new power.
There were insurgencies we could call sort of proto-fascist. Groups called the Silver Legion, the Silver Shirts, the Black Legion. Most of these groups were continuing some of the themes of the Ku Klux Klan. And these groups often carried out vigilante violence against Catholic workers, black workers in some of the factories in the North. These groups had great aspirations to become much larger than they were. Some of them had aspirations to imitate what had happened in Italy and was happening in Germany.